My wife signed the order to demolish my father's restaurant at 4:12 in the morning. By sunrise, her male assistant was standing across the street with architectural plans for the hotel that would replace it. I reached Harbor Street at 6:38. The first excavator had already driven its steel bucket through the second-floor windows of Calder's Wharf. Glass burst onto the sidewalk. A faded blue curtain one my mother had sewn before she died hung from the broken frame for several seconds before falling into the debris. My father stood behind a temporary barricade in his kitchen clothes. He was 71 years old, wearing a white apron over a plaid shirt, as if he had arrived expecting to prepare breakfast instead of watch 43 years of his life collapse. 2 Port Ashford police officers kept him away from the building. "Dad." He turned toward me. His face was dry, but his hands shook. "They gave me 20 minutes, he said. "For what?" "To remove personal property." I looked at the restaurant. A demolition crew had surrounded the building with fencing and city vehicles. Workers in reflective jackets sprayed water into the dust while another excavator crushed the rear dining room. "Who authorized this?" My father pointed toward the intersection. I saw my wife immediately. Mayor Evelyn Calder stood beside a black city SUV in a navy coat, speaking with reporters. Her hair was tied back, and her expression carried the calm authority that had helped her win 2 elections in Port Ashford, South Carolina. At her right shoulder stood Grant Vickers, her chief of staff, the man who had spent the past year promoting a luxury waterfront development called the Meridian Grand. The proposed hotel required 3 parcels along Harbor Street. Grant's investors controlled 2. My father owned the third. He had rejected 4 purchase offers. The last one arrived 2 weeks earlier and included a handwritten note from Grant. "This is the final opportunity to leave with dignity." My father had returned it and signed. Now his restaurant was coming down. I pushed through the small crowd gathering along the barricade. A police officer stepped in front of me. "Sir, this is an active demolition zone. My family owns the building." "Then you need to speak with the city representative. I'm married to her." His eyes moved toward Evelyn. Recognition replaced uncertainty. "Mr. Calder." "Yes." He lowered his voice. "The building was condemned under an emergency structural order. We were told there was an immediate collapse risk." "Who told you?" "The building commissioner." "Where is he?" "I don't know." I looked toward the excavator. "Stop the demolition until I see the inspection." "I can't do that." "Then call whoever can." Evelyn noticed me. She ended the interview and walked toward the barricade. Grant followed several steps behind her, holding a leather portfolio beneath one arm. "Daniel," she said, "you shouldn't be inside the restricted area. You shouldn't be destroying my father's restaurant." Her eyes flicked toward the cameras. "This is not the place. It became the place when you brought excavators." My father approached the barricade. "Evelyn, there was nothing wrong with that building." She looked at him with the careful sympathy politicians used when cameras were close. "Walter, the city received an engineering report identifying severe foundation movement, compromised support beams, and a possible gas line rupture. I opened yesterday. 200 people ate there. That does not make it safe." "Who inspected it?" "The city's emergency contractor." "What emergency contractor?" I asked. Grant answered. "Atlantic Structural Response." I knew the name. The firm had been registered in Delaware 7 months earlier. It had no local office, no listed engineers on its public website, and one major contract in Port Ashford. Emergency consulting for the Meridian Grand Development District. "Who signed the report?" I asked. Grant adjusted the portfolio beneath his arm. "That information will be released through the proper process. I'm a licensed civil engineer." "Show me the report." Evelyn's expression tightened. "You do not work for the city." "No. That means I'm one of the few engineers here who doesn't report to you." "Daniel. Did you read the inspection before signing the demolition order?" "Yes." "Who performed it?" She hesitated. Grant stepped closer. "The mayor acted under Section 1874 of the Municipal Code. It authorizes immediate removal of a structure presenting an imminent danger to public safety." "I know the code." "It also requires the building commissioner to certify the danger personally or adopt a report from a licensed South Carolina engineer." Grant's smile was slight. "The certification is valid." "Then give me the engineer's name." Neither of them answered. Behind us, the excavator tore through the restaurant's west wall. My father made a sound I had never heard from him before. Not a cry. Something smaller. The sound of a man realizing no one intended to stop. He had opened Calder's Wharf when he was 28. At first, it had 6 tables and a counter. My mother handled the books while he cooked shrimp, grits, and crab cakes for dockworkers. When a hurricane flooded Harbor Street, they rebuilt. When my mother became ill, the restaurant paid for treatments insurance did not cover. After she died, my father kept her handwritten recipes locked in a cabinet beside the kitchen office. "Where are Mom's books?" I asked. He stared at the collapsing building. "Inside." I turned toward Evelyn. "You gave him 20 minutes and refused to let him retrieve family property?" The fire marshal restricted interior access. "The building is stable enough for demolition workers but not stable enough for one supervised entry. The determination was made for safety." "By whom?" She lowered her voice. "I found out about the final order late last night. You signed it at 4:12. How do you know the time?" "The copy taped to the barricade has your electronic signature." For 1 second, surprise crossed her face. Then it disappeared. "I signed after receiving the commissioner's recommendation." "Where is Commissioner Reddick?" "He took medical leave this morning." "At 4 in the morning?" Grant moved between us. "Daniel, the mayor is trying to prevent a tragedy. Turning this into a family argument will not save the building." "No, but a court order might." He looked toward the restaurant. The excavator had already destroyed more than half of it. "You're late for that." My father lunged toward him. I caught Dad by the shoulders before the officers reacted. "You bought this," my father said. "You couldn't get me to sell, so you had her condemn it." Grant did not step back. "The city will compensate you at fair market value." "I didn't want your money. The waterfront cannot remain frozen because one owner refuses to recognize progress." There it was. Not public safety. Progress. The word Grant used in every Meridian Grand presentation. A 22-story hotel, conference center, rooftop restaurant, and private marina. According to the public proposal, the project would create 400 jobs and transform Port Ashford into a regional destination. According to the documents I had seen, Grant's brother controlled one of the development partnerships. I had told Evelyn that. She said the city attorney found no direct conflict because Grant held no shares personally. I asked why her chief of staff had spent months negotiating private purchases for the project. She accused me of distrusting her administration because my father refused to sell. Now the answer stood behind her with hotel plans beneath his arm. A gust of wind lifted the portfolio cover. For an instant, I saw the top sheet. Meridian Grand Final Site Configuration. The restaurant parcel was already shaded in gold. Not marked as pending acquisition. Not marked as privately owned. Included. The drawing carried a revision date from 3 months earlier. I pointed toward it. "You designed the hotel over his property before the city condemned it." Grant closed the portfolio. "Conceptual planning does not establish ownership. The final site configuration does." "Daniel," Evelyn said, "stop. Did you know?" "I knew the developers were preparing alternatives." "That isn't an alternative. It shows the hotel lobby where Dad's kitchen stood." Her eyes moved toward Grant. He answered for her. "The redevelopment agreement allows the city to assemble necessary parcels. Through voluntary sale or lawful eminent domain. Not a false emergency demolition." Evelyn stepped closer to me. "You have no basis to call the report false. Then release it. It is part of an active safety file." "You released the conclusion to reporters. Because the public needed to understand why we acted. The public needed your version." Her face hardened. "Do not accuse me of using my office against your family." I looked past her. The restaurant sign had fallen. Calder's Wharf struck the pavement face down and split through the center. "You already used it." The reporters had moved closer. Grant noticed and lowered his voice. "Your father will receive compensation based on the pre-demolition appraisal." "What appraisal?" "The city obtained one last month." My father stared at him. "No appraiser entered my building." Grant said nothing. I understood. The city had valued the property before declaring the emergency. It had prepared compensation before the building became an imminent danger. This was not a crisis response. It was a land acquisition with an excavator. My phone rang. The caller was Elise Moreno, Port Ashford's deputy planning director. I had met her twice during public meetings. She was careful, quiet, and usually seated behind Grant while he presented redevelopment plans. I answered. "Daniel, are you at the restaurant?" "Yes. Can you speak privately?" I looked toward Evelyn and Grant. "Not here." "Then listen. Do not argue with them about the engineering report." "Why?" "Because the report they released is not the original." My grip tightened around the phone. "What do you mean?" "The first inspection did not recommend demolition. It said the foundation needed monitoring but found no immediate collapse risk." "Who changed it?" "I can't say over the phone." "Where is the original?" "I preserved the development file before my access was disabled." "Your access was disabled?" 20 minutes ago." Behind Evelyn, Grant checked his phone. His expression changed. Elise continued. "The file contains the original inspection, the revised report, the appraisal, internal emails, and the draft land transfer agreement." "What land transfer agreement?" "The one promising the restaurant parcel to Meridian Grand after emergency clearance." My eyes moved to Grant's leather portfolio. "When was it drafted?" 6 weeks ago." "Who approved it?" Silence. Then Elise said, "Your wife's signature is on the authorization page." The final wall of Calder's Wharf collapsed. Dust rolled across Harbor Street and swallowed the place where my parents had built their life. Evelyn watched the demolition. Grant watched me. He did not know what Elise had preserved. But he knew someone had found something, because he began walking toward the city SUV while calling security. "Elise, where are you?" "At the state records office. I sent the file to an attorney and scheduled an automatic release in case anyone tries to seize it." "Send it to me." "I already did." My phone vibrated. A secure link appeared on the screen. The file was titled, Meridian Grand Controlled Acquisition Strategy. I opened the index. The first document was the original structural inspection. The second was a memo from Grant directing staff to create an emergency basis for demolition. The third was an email from Evelyn's private account. "Proceed before Walter Calder files another injunction. Once the structure is gone, the parcel dispute becomes a compensation issue instead of a development obstacle." I read it twice. My wife had not been deceived into signing a late-night safety order. She had understood exactly what destroying the building would accomplish. I looked up. Evelyn was walking toward me, telling the officers to remove my father and me from the demolition zone. I locked my phone and placed it in my pocket. For the moment, I said nothing about the file. The restaurant was already gone. I would not give her a warning before I found out how much of the city she had used to make it disappear. I did not open the full archive on Harbor Street. Grant was already speaking to a police supervisor. Evelyn stood beside my father, explaining that the city would appoint a relocation coordinator and provide temporary assistance. Dad stared at the remains of his kitchen. He did not answer her. I took his arm. "We're leaving." Evelyn stepped in front of us. "Daniel, the city needs Walter's contact information for the compensation process. You have owned property records. This is not the time to become uncooperative." I looked at the dust on her coat. "My father's building is on the ground because you wanted his parcel converted into a payment dispute. Do not lecture me about cooperation." Her eyes sharpened. "What are you talking about?" I had revealed too much. Grant turned toward us. I placed my father in my truck without answering. As I pulled away, I saw Grant speaking rapidly into Evelyn's ear. She watched us until the intersection disappeared behind the windshield. Dad remained silent for 10 minutes. Then he asked, "Did she know?" I kept my eyes on the road. "I'm finding out." "You already know." I did. But I was not ready to say it aloud while he still wore the apron he had tied before dawn. Calder's Wharf had not only been his business. It had been his routine after my mother died. He arrived at 5 every morning. He made the first pot of coffee himself. He sat at table 7 before opening and read yesterday's receipts while the shrimp stock simmered. When I was 13, he taught me to calculate food cost on the back of supplier invoices. When I left for engineering school, he kept my summer job open even after I told him I would not return to restaurant work. He never resented that I chose another life. Evelyn used to admire him for it. Before she became mayor, she spent campaign nights in the back booth with volunteers eating whatever Dad had left in the kitchen. He hung her first city council poster in the front window. When she won the mayoral election, he closed the restaurant for her celebration. Grant had attended that night too. Back then, He was a campaign strategist from Charleston with an expensive watch and a talent for making every donor believe he remembered them personally. Evelyn hired him as chief of staff after her inauguration. I questioned the decision. She said governing required political instincts, not only good intentions. Over the next 4 years, Grant became the person who decided which meetings reached her calendar, which warnings deserved urgency, and which critics could be dismissed as opponents of progress. My father became one of those critics when Meridian Grand appeared. The development was not automatically a bad idea. Port Ashford's waterfront had empty warehouses, aging utilities, and seasonal unemployment. A hotel and conference center could have brought real investment. The problem was the location. Grant's preferred site required removing 3 active businesses, including Calder's Wharf. Instead of redesigning around them, he treated the owners as obstacles. Dad refused because the restaurant made money and because my mother's ashes had been scattered from the pier behind it. Evelyn told me privately that emotion could not control city planning. I told her private developers could not use City Hall as a collection agency. We stopped discussing the project at home after that. Now I knew the silence had not made her neutral. It had only removed me from the decisions. I drove Dad to my office at Mercer Civil Analysis, the engineering consultancy I founded 11 years earlier. My partner, Priya Nanduri, met us at the rear entrance. She had already seen the demolition on the news. "What do you need?" she asked. "A private room, a computer disconnected from our main network, and coffee for Dad." "I don't need coffee," he said. Priya looked at him. "You owned a breakfast restaurant for 43 years. You need coffee." For the first time that morning, his mouth almost moved into a smile. She took him to the staff kitchen while I called my attorney. Her name was Claire Donnelly, and she specialized in land use disputes, government procurement, and public record litigation. She had represented Mercer Civil when a county tried to conceal failed bridge inspections behind an active investigation exemption. Claire arrived within 30 minutes. I gave her the secure link from Elise. "Do not download anything yet," she said. "We need to preserve the transmission details. It may have an automatic release. That makes chain of custody more important, not less." We photographed the original message, recorded the timestamp, and created a forensic copy on an encrypted drive. Claire contacted Elisa's attorney to confirm when the archive had been collected and whether any files had been altered. Only then did we begin reviewing it. The index contained 87 documents. The original structural inspection was signed by Lyle Hendricks, a licensed engineer who had worked in South Carolina for 26 years. His report identified saltwater corrosion on 2 exterior supports, minor settlement near the rear storage room, and an outdated gas regulator. He recommended temporary shoring, regulator replacement, and a full foundation survey within 60 days. His conclusion was clear. The building did not present an imminent collapse hazard. The revised report carried the same project number and photographs. But Hendricks's signature had been replaced by an electronic certification from Atlantic Structural Response. Several sentences had changed. Localized deterioration became systemic structural failure. Routine corrective work became immediate removal required. The recommendation for temporary shoring disappeared entirely. "Can they legally adopt another engineer's inspection?" I asked. "Only if the second engineer independently reviews the work and accepts professional responsibility," Claire said. "Who signed for Atlantic?" "No individual name appears. That isn't valid. It may be more than invalid. It may be fabricated." We opened the company records. Atlantic Structural Response had been incorporated by a registered agent in Delaware. Its Port Ashford emergency contract listed a business address inside a shared office building. The contact email belonged to Noah Vickers, Grant's younger brother. Priya joined us after settling Dad in an unused office. "Does Evelyn know the connection?" The next document answered her. It was an email from the city ethics officer to Evelyn and Grant. The officer warned that Noah's ownership created an apparent conflict and recommended competitive procurement or Grant's complete recusal. Grant replied that Atlantic was controlled through an independent holding company. The ethics officer rejected that explanation. Evelyn ended the exchange. "Given the urgent nature of waterfront stabilization, proceed under emergency authority. Grant will remain involved because of his institutional knowledge." Claire copied the email reference into her notes. She overruled a written ethics warning. Yes. That matters more than the brother's name alone. The appraisal came next. Grant had told us it was conducted 1 month before demolition. The date on the report was 5 months earlier. It valued my father's property at $940,000 using sales from inland commercial streets where rents were less than half those on the waterfront. It excluded the restaurant's equipment, operating income, and dock access. A second confidential valuation prepared for the Meridian investors placed the parcel's development value at $3.8 million. Dad entered while I was reading it. What did they say it was worth? I hesitated. Tell me. $940,000. He laughed once. It was a bitter sound. Grant offered me 1.2. The developer's own report valued the land at 3.8. Dad lowered himself into a chair. So even the offer was a trick. It was an attempt to buy below their projected value. Your wife knew. I opened the distribution list. Evelyn had received both appraisals. Yes. He looked toward the blank wall. I gave her free meals when she couldn't pay her campaign staff. I know. She called your mother family. I know. He pressed both hands against his knees. Don't protect her because she's your wife. The sentence hit harder because he had never asked me to choose between them. I won't. The most important folder was labeled Acquisition Sequence. It contained a timeline beginning 6 months earlier. Phase 1, Increase code inspections and document repair concerns. Phase 2, Issue revised structural notice. Phase 3, Authorize emergency clearance before owner obtains injunctive relief. Phase 4, Transfer cleared parcel to the Port Ashford Development Authority. Phase 5, Lease parcel to Meridian Hospitality Partners for 99 years. The land transfer agreement had already been drafted. The city would obtain the parcel through condemnation authority, then lease it to Meridian for $1 per year during the first 10 years. In exchange, Meridian promised construction jobs, tourism revenue, and a public walkway along the water. The agreement granted the developer exclusive control over the hotel, marina, retail space, and restaurant concessions. Grant would become executive director of the Development Authority after leaving City Hall. His proposed compensation was $480,000 per year plus a completion bonus. Priya stared at the page. This is not his assistant helping her with a project. No, he created his next job using public power. Claire pointed toward a footnote. The agreement is not signed by the authority board. Can it still matter? It proves planning and motive. Not final approval. Evelyn's authorization appeared in a separate memorandum. It allowed Grant to negotiate final development terms and coordinate necessary site control actions. Her signature was genuine. I had seen it on hundreds of documents. The email from her private account was worse. Proceed before Walter Calder files another injunction. Once the structure is gone, the parcel dispute becomes a compensation issue instead of a development obstacle. Grant responded, agreed. Atlantic will strengthen the emergency language. I'll have police ready before sunrise. Evelyn replied, keep Daniel away until clearance is complete. He will turn this into an engineering fight. I read that sentence several times. She had not merely chosen Grant's plan over my father's restaurant. She had anticipated that I would identify the false report and arranged the demolition before I could intervene. Claire watched me carefully. Do not contact her. I wasn't going to. Do not contact Grant either. I understand. We need emergency relief before the city transfers the parcel. The building is gone. The land is not. That distinction gave us the first useful objective. Claire began drafting requests for a temporary restraining order to block transfer, redevelopment, debris removal beyond safety needs, and destruction of city records. She also prepared preservation notices for the mayor's office, planning department, building commission, police department, development authority, Atlantic Structural Response, and Meridian Hospitality Partners. Dad looked at the archive index. What about my recipes? The question silenced the room. The demolition crew had not allowed him to retrieve the locked cabinet. If the books survived the first collapse, they might now be buried beneath brick and timber. Priya called the site superintendent. He refused access because the property remained under emergency control. Claire sent a written demand that debris removal stop until personal property could be recovered under supervised conditions. 30 minutes later, the city attorney responded. The city would permit retrieval only after the demolition contractor certified the site safe. The demolition contractor was a subsidiary of the same investment group behind Meridian. Every layer led back to Grant's project. At 4, Elise joined us by encrypted video from her attorney's office. She looked exhausted. Grant suspended me for unauthorized access, she said. You had authority to access the planning archive? Claire asked. Yes. I was deputy planning director and records custodian for waterfront projects. Why did you preserve it? Because he ordered staff to delete preliminary inspections after the demolition. Did Evelyn know? Elise hesitated. I saw him leave her office after giving the instruction. 10 minutes later, the mayor emailed department heads reminding us that draft materials not used in final decisions could be removed under the retention schedule. Claire leaned closer to the screen. Were these records eligible for deletion? No. They concerned active property acquisition, public contracts, and anticipated litigation. Did you tell her? I replied with the retention policy. What happened? My account was disabled. Who authorized that? Grant's office. Claire asked the question I had avoided. Why send the archive to Daniel instead of the Inspector General? I sent it to both. That helped. Elise was not acting as my private source alone. She had transmitted the same evidence to the State Ethics Commission and the South Carolina Inspector General. What is the automatic release? I asked. A public record package scheduled for tomorrow afternoon unless my attorney cancels it. Claire shook her head. Do not cancel it yet, but do not release privileged personal data. Let your attorney coordinate. Elise agreed. Before ending the call, she said, Daniel, there is another file not included in the archive. What file? A campaign finance reconciliation. Whose campaign? Evelyn's re-election committee. My stomach tightened. What does it show? I only saw the cover sheet. Meridian-linked companies paid for consulting and polling that never appeared as reported contributions. Was Grant involved? He approved the invoices. And Evelyn? I don't know. For the first time all day, the evidence did not already answer the question. That uncertainty mattered. I would not assign guilt because the pattern made it easy. Claire filed the emergency motion at 5:36. At 6:10, a circuit judge issued a temporary hold preventing the city from transferring, leasing, or materially altering the restaurant parcel until a hearing could be held. At 6:24, the city attorney notified Evelyn and Grant. At 6:31, Evelyn called me. I let it ring. She called again. Then a message appeared. You have no idea what you are stopping. This project affects thousands of people. I showed Claire. Do not respond. A second message arrived. Grant says Elise stole incomplete drafts. Meet me tonight before you destroy the city over your father's refusal to compromise. Dad read it over my shoulder. She still thinks this is about me refusing to sell. I looked at the signed demolition strategy, the false engineering report, the 2 appraisals, and Grant's future employment agreement. No, I said. She needs it to be about that. At 7, the State Inspector General confirmed receipt of Elise's archive and opened a preliminary investigation into procurement fraud, misuse of emergency authority, records interference, and undisclosed conflicts. The Ethics Commission requested Evelyn's private email records. The Development Authority canceled its morning vote on the Meridian lease. The hotel project did not collapse. No one had been arrested. Evelyn was still mayor. Grant still occupied the office beside hers. But for the first time, they could not move faster than the evidence. As I prepared to leave, Claire opened one final document from the archive. It was a draft mayoral address scheduled for delivery after the demolition. The speech praised Evelyn for making a painful but necessary choice between private nostalgia and Port Ashford's future. A highlighted note from Grant appeared in the margin. Have Walter present for sympathy if Daniel can be controlled. Evelyn had replied beneath it. Daniel won't cooperate once he sees the site. Keep him outside the perimeter until the cameras are ready. The demolition had not only been planned. So had our grief. And my wife intended to use my father's loss as the opening image of her political victory. The city tried to dissolve the restraining order at 9 the next morning. By 8:30, every seat in Judge Miriam Holt's courtroom was occupied. Reporters filled the rear benches. Harbor Street business owners stood along the walls. Representatives from Meridian Hospitality Partners sat behind 3 attorneys in matching gray suits. My father sat beside Claire and me. He wore the same plaid shirt from the demolition, but the apron was gone. Across the aisle, Evelyn entered with the city attorney. Grant followed her carrying 2 document boxes. He did not look like a man whose hotel project had been paused by evidence of fraud. He looked prepared to explain why everyone else had misunderstood necessary progress. Evelyn glanced toward me. I did not acknowledge her. The city attorney began by describing the demolition as an emergency public safety action. He argued that my father no longer owned a usable structure and that delaying transfer of the cleared parcel would expose Port Ashford to millions of dollars in contractual damages. Judge Holt interrupted. Was a transfer agreement executed before demolition? No, Your Honor. Then what contract creates those damages? Meridian has relied on the city's redevelopment commitments. Commitments concerning property the city did not own? The attorney paused. Preliminary commitments. Then the developer assumed preliminary risk. Claire stood. The city is asking this court to reward the destruction of evidence. The original inspection found no imminent collapse risk. The revised report was issued through a company linked to the mayor's chief of staff. The land transfer strategy existed before the emergency order. Grant leaned toward the city attorney and whispered. Judge Holt noticed. Mr. Vickers, are you counsel? No, Your Honor. Then allow counsel to speak. Claire presented Lyle Hendricks's original engineering report, the revised Atlantic report, and the licensing records showing Atlantic had no named South Carolina engineer responsible for the conclusion. The city attorney objected that the archive had been unlawfully obtained. Elise Moreno was the authorized records custodian, Claire said. She preserved government documents after receiving an instruction to delete them during active litigation. She removed confidential planning materials. She delivered identical copies to the state inspector general. Judge Holt looked at the city attorney. Has the city denied that these records are authentic? We have not completed authentication. That was not my question. No, Claire called Hendricks by video. He confirmed he inspected Calder's Wharf 10 days before demolition. Did you find an imminent danger requiring immediate destruction? Claire asked. No. Did you authorize Atlantic Structural Response to replace your conclusion? No. Did anyone from the mayor's office ask you to revise it? Grant Vickers called twice. Grant's expression remained still. What did he request? He wanted me to state that the building could collapse without warning. Was that your professional opinion? No. What happened after you refused? I was told my services were no longer required. The city attorney asked whether the building contained structural defects. Yes, Hendricks said. Most 40-year-old waterfront buildings do. So demolition was one possible remedy? After proper evaluation, owner notice, and consideration of repair. It was not an emergency necessity. My father closed his eyes. For the first time since sunrise the previous day, an official record acknowledged that his restaurant could have been saved. Claire then presented the acquisition timeline. The judge read the phases silently. Increase inspections. Revise the structural notice. Clear the site before an injunction. Convert the dispute into compensation. Her expression hardened. Who created this document? The city attorney looked toward Grant. Grant stood. My development team prepared a planning scenario. Your development team inside City Hall? Staff coordinating the waterfront district. Does clear the site before an injunction reflect the city's ordinary land acquisition procedure? It reflects concern that litigation could delay a project with significant public benefit. Judge Holt placed the document down. Courts generally consider preventing unlawful government action a benefit, not an inconvenience. A few people in the gallery reacted before the bailiff called for silence. The judge then asked why the city had appraised the restaurant 5 months before declaring an emergency. Grant said advance valuations were normal for redevelopment planning. Was Walter Calder informed? No. Was the appraisal used in negotiations? It informed the city's understanding of the parcel. The confidential developer appraisal valued it at 4 times the city figure. That was based on a completed hotel project. So the city valued Mr. Calder's property as an isolated restaurant while promising the developer its value as part of a luxury complex. Grant's confidence weakened. The calculations served different purposes. Yes, the judge said. That is apparent. During a brief recess, Evelyn approached me in the hallway. Claire stepped between us. Any communication should go through counsel. This is my husband, Evelyn said. He is also an adverse party in active litigation. Evelyn looked around at the reporters. Daniel, your father will receive compensation. We can preserve the restaurant's name inside the hotel. Dad stood from the bench. My name isn't yours to preserve. She turned toward him. Walter, I know this is painful. You scheduled a speech about my pain. Her face changed. Grant had not told her we found the draft. Dad continued. You planned to stand in front of what was left and call my life nostalgia. I did not approve that language. Your response is beneath it. That was a preliminary communications draft. You people use preliminary for every lie caught before it becomes final. A reporter's phone rose. Evelyn noticed and lowered her voice. The hotel would create hundreds of jobs. My restaurant employed 32 people. We offered relocation assistance. After tearing down their workplace before breakfast, Grant entered the hallway. Mayor, the judge is returning. Evelyn did not move. She looked at me. You could stop this from becoming a public war. You made it public when you brought cameras to the demolition. I didn't know Grant planned to use Walter in the speech. You knew he planned to keep me outside until the site was cleared. Her eyes narrowed. Elise gave you private emails. She preserved public records. You're letting a disgruntled employee destroy years of work. You disabled her access after she cited the retention law. That was Grant's administrative decision. He is your chief of staff. I cannot personally supervise every account change. No. You only personally signed the demolition order. Grant touched her elbow. We need to go. She allowed him to guide her back toward the courtroom. The gesture told me more than her words. Even after seeing the false report, the acquisition plan, and the speech about my father's grief, she still positioned Grant beside her as the person helping her survive me. When the hearing resumed, the city called Evelyn. The city attorney asked her to explain why she approved demolition. I believed the building posed an immediate danger, she said. When did you receive that information? Shortly before midnight. Did you understand Atlantic Structural Response was connected to Mr. Vickers's brother? I knew there was a family relationship, but the city's emergency procurement rules permitted the engagement. Claire rose for cross-examination. Did the ethics officer recommend that Grant Vickers recuse himself? Yes. Did you overrule that recommendation? I determined his knowledge was necessary. Did you receive Mr. Hendricks's original report? I received a summary. Claire displayed an email attachment. This message from Deputy Director Moreno sent you the entire report 6 days before demolition. Did you open it? Evelyn looked toward Grant. I receive hundreds of documents. The access log shows your account opened it for 7 minutes. I may have reviewed portions. Did you see the conclusion stating there was no imminent collapse risk? I don't remember. Did Mr. Vickers later tell you Atlantic would strengthen the emergency language? Yes. Did you ask why an engineering conclusion needed strengthening? I understood that additional review had identified greater danger. Where is that additional review? The revised report. Without a licensed engineer's name. I relied on staff. Claire displayed Evelyn's private email. Proceed before Walter Calder files another injunction. Why were you discussing an injunction before your administration notified Mr. Calder of any emergency? Evelyn's jaw tightened. Because he had threatened litigation during acquisition discussions. He had rejected purchase offers. He had not filed suit. We expected him to. So you demolished the building before he could ask a court to review your evidence. I acted to protect the public. Claire placed the controlled acquisition timeline on the screen. Did you approve this strategy? I approved redevelopment coordination. I did not approve every phrase drafted by staff. Did you write that the parcel dispute would become only a compensation issue once the structure was gone? Yes. The courtroom became completely still. Claire waited before asking the next question. So when you signed the emergency order, you understood demolition would weaken Mr. Calder's ability to resist the hotel project. I understood it would remove a dangerous structure. That was not my question. Evelyn looked toward the judge. Yes. I understood it would change the legal dispute. My father lowered his head. Claire continued. Did you instruct staff to keep your husband outside the perimeter until demolition was complete? I did not want Daniel interfering with an active safety operation. He is a licensed civil engineer. He is also Walter's son. Did you believe he might identify flaws in the report? I believed he would challenge any conclusion that harmed his father. Even an accurate one? Yes. Then why not allow an independent engineer to review it before destruction? Evelyn had no answer that helped her. After closing arguments, Judge Holt ruled from the bench. The restraining order would remain in effect. The city could remove debris only as necessary to prevent genuine hazards and recover personal property. It could not transfer, lease, condemn, or alter title to the parcel. The judge ordered an independent structural and environmental review of the remaining foundation. She also ordered preservation of all records connected to the demolition, Meridian Grand, Atlantic Structural Response, the Development Authority, and communications among Evelyn, Grant, Noah Vickers, and Meridian's investors. Finally, she referred the apparent alteration of an engineering report to the State Licensing Board and the matter of potential records destruction to prosecutors. The ruling did not return my father's restaurant. It protected the ground beneath it. Outside the courthouse, microphones surrounded Evelyn. A reporter asked whether she still supported Grant. Yes, she said. The answer came without hesitation. Mr. Vickers has served Port Ashford through a complex redevelopment effort. Allegations should not replace a complete investigation. Will you suspend him while that investigation proceeds? No, why? Because the city cannot abandon an essential project every time political opponents release incomplete files. I stood less than 20 feet away. She called the original inspection, her emails, and Grant's employment agreement incomplete. Then a reporter asked whether my lawsuit created an unmanageable conflict for her administration. Evelyn looked directly at me before answering. My husband and his father have chosen private litigation over a project that could benefit the entire city. I will not allow family pressure to dictate public policy. Dad's hand tightened around his cane. She had turned us into the threat. Again. Grant stepped to the microphone beside her. Meridian Grand will continue. The city will compensate affected owners fairly, and we will not allow nostalgia or personal influence to stop economic renewal. I expected anger. Instead, I felt the last uncertainty leave me. Evelyn had testified under oath that she knew the demolition would weaken Dad's legal position. She had watched Grant's false engineering report exposed. She knew his brother received the emergency contract and that he had negotiated a future job with the developer. She still stood beside him. Claire leaned toward me. Do not respond publicly yet. I won't. What are you going to do? Separate my life from hers before the rest of this comes out. That afternoon, I hired family attorney Marcus Wynn. Evelyn and I had no children. Our finances were partly separate because Mercer Civil existed before the marriage, but we shared the house, investment accounts, and several properties. I instructed Marcus to prepare a legal separation, preserve business ownership records, and prohibit either of us from using marital access to obtain confidential professional information. Are you certain? He asked. Yes. Public officials sometimes reconcile after investigations end. This is not about whether she survives the investigation. What is it about? She destroyed my father's life's work, then publicly blamed him for objecting. Marcus nodded. I'll file tomorrow. At 5, supervised recovery began at the restaurant site. The demolition crew lifted debris while Dad, Priya, a fire inspector, and 2 independent witnesses watched from behind a marked line. They found the office cabinet crushed beneath part of the second floor. Its steel frame had bent, but the lower drawer remained closed. Inside were my mother's recipe books. The covers were wet and coated in plaster dust. Several pages had torn loose, but her handwriting was still visible. Dad held the books against his chest. For the first time since the demolition, he cried. That evening, Evelyn returned to our house. I was already packing. She stood in the bedroom doorway while I placed clothes into a suitcase. You're leaving because of a temporary court order? I'm leaving because you knew. Daniel, I was trying to keep $1 billion investment alive. You demolished Dad's restaurant to change his legal rights. The building had real defects. Defects that could be repaired. You don't know what would have happened. Neither did you. That is why the law required review. She saw the separation attorney's card on the dresser. Her face lost color. You hired someone. Yes. You're filing against me while Grant is under investigation. I'm filing because you are not. I told reporters we need a complete process. You refused to suspend the man whose brother issued the false report. Suspending him would look like an admission. You still care more about appearances than facts. He is the only person who understands the development agreements. That is because you allowed him to control them. She stepped toward me. Do not leave me in the middle of this. You left my father behind a barricade while his building came down. That was different. It always is when the harm belongs to someone else. Her eyes filled with tears. Grant said the project would collapse if we waited. And you believed him. I believed the city could not afford another delay. You decided my father could afford the loss instead. I closed the suitcase. What happens when the full file becomes public? She asked. That depends on what investigators find. You already have it. Yes. You could release only the documents about Grant. The documents include your decisions. I was misled. You were warned by the engineer, the ethics officer, Elise, Dad, and me. Her tears fell. I chose the project. No. You chose Grant's future over my father's rights. I carried the suitcase toward the door. She caught my sleeve. Daniel, please. I can fix the compensation. The restaurant was not for sale. I can rebuild it somewhere else. You cannot rebuild 43 years somewhere else. Her hand slipped away. At the front door, my phone vibrated. Claire had forwarded a notice from the State Inspector General. Investigators had authenticated the Controlled Acquisition Archive. They had also obtained Grant's private development agreement. One paragraph had not appeared in Elisa's copy. If Meridian Grand received final site control, Grant would earn a $12 million completion payment. Half would be routed through a consulting trust. The listed beneficiary was not Grant. It was Evelyn Calder's re-election committee. I looked back at my wife. She did not yet know that Grant had attached her political future to the hotel. Or perhaps she did. Either way, I no longer intended to learn the answer as her husband. I left the house before midnight. I took 2 suitcases, my work laptop, personal records, and the framed photograph of my parents standing outside Calder's Wharf on opening day. I did not take furniture. I did not enter Evelyn's home office. I did not copy anything from her devices. Marcus Wynne had been clear: when public corruption and divorce overlapped, even an innocent act could be rewritten as evidence of retaliation. I rented a furnished apartment 3 blocks from Mercer Civil. The windows overlooked the inland freight terminal rather than the waterfront. At 5 in the morning, truck brakes and loading alarms replaced the gulls I had heard from our bedroom for 9 years. I slept for less than 2 hours. At 7, Marcus filed the legal separation petition. It requested temporary division of finances, exclusive control of Mercer Civil, preservation of marital assets, and an order preventing either spouse from using personal access to obtain the other's business records. Evelyn received electronic service before her morning briefing. She called immediately. I let Marcus answer through counsel. 20 minutes later, Grant issued a statement from the mayor's office. The statement claimed that individuals with personal and financial interests in obstructing Meridian Grand were attempting to exploit confidential planning documents during a family dispute. It did not name me. It did not need to. By 9, 3 television stations were asking whether my separation filing was part of an effort to force Evelyn to cancel the hotel. Claire advised one response. My marital case is private. The demolition and public record investigations concern documented government decisions and should be evaluated independently. I repeated that sentence until reporters stopped trying to turn it into something else. Dad stayed at Priya's house because his apartment above the restaurant had been destroyed with the building. He refused my offer to move into the spare room at my new place. I don't need my son watching me sit around, he said. You need somewhere permanent. I need a kitchen. Priya stood beside him with a cup of tea. We have one. Not one where I can sell food. The restaurant's 32 employees had received no warning before the demolition. Some found temporary work. Others had depended on the morning and weekend shifts Calder's Wharf provided. Dad spent the first day calling each of them. He apologized as if he had caused the closure. Then he used his emergency savings to cover 2 weeks of wages. You need that money for legal expenses, I said. They need rent. The city should pay. Then the city can reimburse me. His stubbornness had protected the restaurant for 43 years. Now it gave him something to do besides grieve. At 10, Claire attended an emergency conference with the city attorney and Judge Holt. The city requested permission to remove all debris immediately, arguing that Harbor Street could not reopen while unstable material remained. Claire agreed to limited cleanup under independent supervision. The judge ordered every major structural component photographed and catalogued before removal. Any surviving records, equipment, or personal property had to be preserved. The city also had to store the restaurant's original bricks, sign fragments, and recoverable fixtures until ownership and damages were resolved. Grant's office objected that the process would delay redevelopment. Judge Holt's written response was one sentence: "Redevelopment is not presently authorized." At noon, the State Inspector General served preservation demands on the mayor's office, Grant's staff, the Development Authority, Meridian Hospitality Partners, Atlantic Structural Response, and Evelyn's re-election committee. The campaign finance section attracted immediate attention. South Carolina law allowed committees to purchase polling and consulting services. It did not allow private developers to secretly pay those expenses as unreported contributions. The $12 million completion clause was not itself proof that Evelyn had accepted an illegal benefit. Grant could have inserted the campaign committee without her knowledge. The question was why. Investigators subpoenaed the trust documents. They also requested every communication between Grant and the re-election treasurer, Lydia Pell. Lydia resigned that afternoon. Her attorney issued a statement saying she had discovered material inconsistencies in the committee's financial records and intended to cooperate. Evelyn responded from City Hall: "My campaign has followed all disclosure laws. I will not allow unsupported allegations to distract this administration from essential work." Grant stood behind her during the statement. He had not been suspended. He still controlled access to her office. He still answered questions before she could. At 2, the Port Ashford Development Authority held a special meeting. The board's attorney advised members that voting on the Meridian lease while a court order and state investigation remained active could expose them personally. The authority suspended all negotiations. Meridian's attorneys warned that the company might pursue damages for delay. A board member asked whether Meridian had ever received legal title or an executed lease. The answer was no. The threat lost force once someone asked what right had actually been violated. At Mercer Civil, Priya and I reviewed our own exposure. The city had hired us on 3 infrastructure projects unrelated to the hotel: a seawall assessment, storm drain redesign, and bridge inspection. Grant's statement suggested my opposition to Meridian might contaminate those contracts. "We should expect audits," Priya said. "Prepare everything. It will consume staff time. Then bill none of it to the city." She nodded. We created a document room containing bids, timesheets, inspection photographs, engineering calculations, and conflict disclosures. I instructed every employee not to discuss Evelyn, Grant, or the demolition with city staff outside formal project channels. No jokes in email. No speculation in messages. No attempt to use my marriage for information. The rules felt severe until I remembered the excavator entering my father's windows. Informality had protected only the people with power. At 4, Commissioner Paul Reddick's medical leave ended. He appeared at Claire's office with his attorney. Reddick had served as Port Ashford's building commissioner for 12 years. His name appeared on the emergency demolition certificate beneath Evelyn's signature. He looked exhausted. "I did not approve the final order," he said. "Claire activated the recorder after obtaining consent. Your electronic signature appears on it." Grant's office had access to my approval token. Why? Emergency permits were sometimes processed after hours. Did you authorize that practice? I allowed the mayor's executive coordinator to submit documents after verbal confirmation. Did you verbally confirm Calder's Wharf? No. Did you review Atlantic's report? I saw it after the demolition started. I leaned forward. Why did you take medical leave that morning? Reddick looked at his attorney. The attorney nodded. Grant called me at 3:40, Reddick said. He said the mayor had decided to proceed and needed my office out of the way until the clearance was complete. What did you say? I told him Hendrix's report did not support emergency demolition. And? He said Atlantic had replaced it. Did he tell you Atlantic was connected to his brother? No. Did you contact Evelyn? I called her twice. She did not answer. What happened next? Grant said if I interfered, he would release an internal review accusing my department of ignoring dangerous waterfront buildings. Claire asked, was there such a review? A draft. It contained old complaints, most already resolved. So you took leave? Yes. Why not report the threat? Reddick stared at the table. Because I believed the demolition would happen whether I stayed or not, and I thought distancing myself would protect my pension. My father had lost his building because every person in the chain believed someone else would carry the responsibility. Claire asked whether Reddick would sign an affidavit. He agreed. His testimony did not clear him. He had allowed others to use his approval token for years. But it established that the required building commissioner certification had not occurred. The emergency order was not merely based on false engineering. It had been issued without the official approval Evelyn publicly claimed to possess. At 5:30, Evelyn called Claire and requested a private settlement meeting. Claire included Marcus and the city attorney. The meeting took place by video. Evelyn appeared from her office with Grant seated beside her. I joined from Mercer Civil. Dad refused to participate. The city attorney began. The mayor is prepared to discuss compensation, relocation support, and a possible rebuilding partnership. Claire asked, is the city admitting the demolition order was invalid? No, then what is the basis for settlement? A desire to avoid prolonged litigation. Grant opened a presentation. The first slide showed a redesigned Meridian Grand. A seafood restaurant occupied the ground floor. The name above the entrance read Calder's at Meridian. Evelyn spoke carefully. The developer will provide Walter with a fully equipped restaurant, a long-term lease at no cost, and a share of operating revenue. I stared at the rendering. They had placed my father's name beneath the hotels. You destroyed an independent business and are offering him a themed concession. Grant's expression tightened. We are offering him a future. He already had one. The original building could not support long-term waterfront growth. The court has not found that. Evelyn leaned toward the camera. Daniel, your father could reopen within 18 months. His employees would receive hiring preference. The family name would remain part of Harbor Street. Who owns the restaurant? Meridian. Who controls the lease? The development partnership. Who can terminate it? Grant closed the presentation. This is not productive. No. It is very clear. Evelyn looked at me. What would be enough? Restore my father's property rights. Pay the full damages established through independent valuation. Preserve the site until he decides whether to rebuild or sell. The hotel design cannot work around that parcel. Then redesign it. Investors will leave. That is their choice. Thousands of jobs are at risk. The project has not created thousands of jobs. It will. You keep asking real people to accept immediate harm for benefits Grant promises later. Her face hardened. The city cannot be governed around your family. And it cannot be governed for his. Grant whispered something to her. Evelyn muted the call. When the sound returned, she said, the offer remains open for 48 hours. Claire answered. It is rejected. The meeting ended. At 7, Marcus informed me that Evelyn had accepted the temporary financial restraints in the separation case. She would not challenge Mercer Civil's separate ownership. In exchange, her attorney requested that I refrain from releasing private marital communications unrelated to public business. I agreed. I did not need our arguments, photographs, or personal messages to prove what happened. The official file was enough. That night, Dad and I returned to the restaurant site under court-supervised access. Most debris had been cleared into organized sections. The front sign lay on wooden supports. It had split between Calder's and Wharf. Dad touched the broken letters. I could rebuild, he said. Yes. Same footprint? Depending on the foundation review. Would it be safe? We can make it safe. He looked toward the empty waterfront. I don't know if I want to. You don't have to decide now. I spent years thinking keeping the building was the same as keeping your mother close. He opened one of the recovered recipe books. Several pages had dried into rippled layers. She would have hated that hotel. She hated every hotel breakfast she ever ate. Dad laughed. It was the first real laugh since the demolition. Then he closed the book. I want them held responsible. But I don't want the rest of my life to become what they did. We can protect both things. Can we? We have to try. At 9:14, Claire called. Investigators had opened the consulting trust connected to Grant's $12 million completion payment. The trust had been created by Noah Vickers. Its beneficiary designation did not send money directly to Evelyn's campaign. It sent the money to a political nonprofit called Forward Port Ashford. The nonprofit's director was Lydia Pell, Evelyn's former campaign treasurer. Forward Port Ashford had already paid for polling, advertising strategy, donor research, and opposition files supporting Evelyn's planned campaign for governor. More than $680,000 in Meridian-linked money had passed through it. Evelyn's campaign had used the work. Whether she knew who paid for it remained unproved. Then Claire forwarded one recovered message. Grant had sent it to Evelyn 6 weeks before the demolition. Meridian will cover the statewide groundwork through forward. It stays outside the campaign books, and you enter the governor's race without draining local donors. Evelyn replied 11 minutes later. Make sure nothing ties the work to a city decision. That sentence did not prove she ordered the false inspection. It proved she understood Meridian was financing her political future outside public disclosure. Grant had not attached her career to the hotel without permission. She had attached it herself. Evelyn's message changed the investigation from negligence to motive. Make sure nothing ties the work to a city decision. She had written it 6 weeks before signing the demolition order. Claire warned me not to describe it publicly as a confession. It proves she knew Meridian-linked money was financing political work outside her campaign accounts, she said. It does not, by itself, prove she exchanged the restaurant parcel for that support. The hotel needed Dad's land. Yes. She knew the developer was paying for her governor campaign. Yes. She approved a plan to remove the obstacle. Yes. What else would you call it? A pattern prosecutors will need to connect with admissible evidence. That answer frustrated me because it was correct. Public corruption cases did not become stronger when anger filled gaps in the record. Investigators needed contracts, communications, financial transfers, and proof of intent. Fortunately, Grant had created all four. The State Inspector General referred the forward Port Ashford records to the Attorney General's Public Integrity Division and the State Election Commission. Federal investigators joined because some payments crossed state lines through consulting firms in Delaware, Georgia, and Washington, D.C. No charges were filed immediately. Subpoenas came first. Forward Port Ashford was ordered to produce donor records, invoices, bank statements, advertising contracts, and communications with Evelyn, Grant, Lydia Pell, and Meridian executives. The mayor's office received a separate demand covering every waterfront decision made during the previous 18 months. Grant told department heads to cooperate. Then he instructed them to route all responses through his office. Elise Moreno's attorney notified investigators within an hour. The Inspector General ordered the city to bypass Grant and send records directly to an independent custodian. For the first time since Evelyn became mayor, her chief of staff no longer controlled what investigators saw. At 10 that morning, the Port Ashford City Council convened an emergency session. Council President Miriam Lowe opened by stating that the meeting was not a criminal trial. The council's responsibility was continuity of government and public confidence. Evelyn sat at the central desk. Grant occupied his usual chair behind her. Several council members objected immediately. Mr. Vickers is a subject of the investigation, Councilman Thomas Webb said. Why is he advising the mayor during our discussion of his conduct? Evelyn answered before Grant could. He remains chief of staff and has not been charged with a crime. He negotiated future employment with Meridian. That agreement was preliminary. His brother's firm issued the demolition report. The relationship was disclosed. The ethics officer told you to remove him. Evelyn's posture stiffened. I made an executive determination that his knowledge was essential. Councilwoman Ruth Delaney leaned toward her microphone. Essential to whom? Evelyn did not answer. The council voted 6-1 to prohibit Grant from participating in city decisions involving Meridian, Calder's Wharf, Atlantic Structural Response, or the Development Authority. The resolution did not remove him as chief of staff. It stripped him from the project he had built around himself. Grant whispered to Evelyn while the clerk read the final vote. She turned off her microphone. The cameras still captured her expression. She was not angry at the conflict he had created. She was angry that the council had limited her ability to protect him. The next resolution concerned Evelyn. The city charter allowed the council to suspend specific mayoral procurement powers when an investigation found probable misuse of emergency authority. Evelyn would remain mayor, but contracts above $50,000, emergency demolitions, property transfers, and development agreements would require council approval until the investigation ended. She called the proposal an unconstitutional attempt to seize executive power. The city attorney disagreed. The charter expressly permits temporary oversight, he said. Only where immediate risk exists. Council President Lowe lifted Elisa's preserved acquisition strategy. A privately owned building was demolished under a report connected to the chief of staff's brother, after the mayor acknowledged that destruction would weaken the owner's legal position. The risk is not hypothetical. The resolution passed 5-2. Evelyn's career did not end that day. Her authority narrowed. No major city decision could move through her signature alone. Outside City Hall, she held a press conference. Grant stood behind her despite the council's recusal order. "My political opponents are using my husband's family dispute to paralyze Port Ashford," she said. "I will continue defending jobs, investment, and the future of our waterfront." A reporter asked about Forward Port Ashford. Evelyn said it was an independent nonprofit. "Did you know Meridian-linked companies funded it? I was aware that regional businesses supported economic development advocacy. Did Grant tell you Meridian would cover your statewide political groundwork?" He used informal language describing independent policy research. "Why did you tell him to make sure it was not tied to a city decision?" Evelyn paused. "To preserve legal separation between government and political activity." The reporter followed up. "Was the activity reported as support for your future campaign?" "I was not a declared candidate." That was not an answer. Another reporter asked whether she would suspend Grant. "No, even after the council removed him from the project? Grant has served this city effectively. I will not destroy a career based on selective documents supplied by a disgruntled employee and my estranged husband." My name entered the story again. Not as the engineer whose original report had been validated. Not as the property owner's son. As an estranged husband seeking revenge. Claire called before the press conference ended. "Do not respond emotionally." "I won't. We should correct one fact." "Which one?" "You did not supply the archive. Elise sent it independently to state authorities before you received it." Claire issued a brief statement with Elise's attorney confirming the timeline. No accusation. No marital detail. Only dates. Evelyn's claim collapsed within an hour. At Mercer Civil, the city audits arrived exactly as Priya predicted. Independent reviewers examined our seawall, drainage, and bridge contracts. We provided every bid score, invoice, time record, subcontract, and conflict disclosure. One reviewer asked whether Evelyn had ever pressured procurement staff to hire us. "No," Priya said. "Did she recommend your firm?" "Not in any process we participated in." "Did Mercer Civil receive information unavailable to competitors?" "No." "Did Daniel discuss city bids with her at home?" Daniel was sitting beside her. "I stopped discussing active procurements with Evelyn before she became mayor," I said. "We maintained separate records and calendars." The reviewer requested proof. We had it. Our internal conflict policy predated Meridian Grand by 4 years. It prohibited employees from requesting non-public information from spouses, relatives, or household members employed by public clients. Evelyn had once praised that policy during an ethics forum. The auditors cleared 2 contracts within days. The bridge review remained open because one subcontractor had donated to her mayoral campaign, though the donation occurred after the contract award and below reporting limits. We gave investigators the records anyway. No one at Mercer Civil objected. Evidence protected us only if we did not fear people seeing it. Dad spent most mornings in Priya's kitchen testing recovered recipes. Several books remained water damaged. A paper conservator separated the pages and created digital scans. Dad adjusted ingredient amounts from memory where ink had dissolved. Priya suggested a temporary pop-up dinner to raise money for the former employees. Dad rejected the fundraiser. "I'm not charity." "Then make it a business," she said. 3 days later, a retired couple who owned a vacant waterfront event hall offered Dad its kitchen for 6 months at market rent. They had eaten at Calder's Wharf every anniversary since 1989. Dad reviewed the lease. "No discount?" "None," the owner said. "Good." He reopened as Calder's Table 2 weeks later. It had 12 tables instead of 60. The menu contained 8 dishes. Former employees returned according to available hours, and Dad paid them from revenue rather than donations. The first weekend sold out. Reporters asked him whether the pop-up was a protest against the mayor. "It's dinner," he said. "Order or leave the doorway clear." His refusal to become Evelyn's political symbol made people respect him more. At the restaurant site, independent engineers completed the foundation review. They found corrosion and settlement consistent with Hendrix's original report. Repairs would have required significant work but were technically feasible. The building had not been at risk of immediate collapse. Judge Holt entered the finding into the civil record. The city could no longer claim demolition had been the only safe option. Claire amended our lawsuit. The claims now included unlawful taking, destruction of property without due process, abuse of emergency authority, violation of state constitutional rights, and civil conspiracy involving Grant, Atlantic, Meridian, and city officials still to be identified. We sought full business damages, replacement value, lost income, personal property loss, and restoration of Dad's control over the parcel. We did not demand ownership of the hotel project. We demanded the rights the demolition had attempted to erase. Meridian offered to settle privately. Its attorneys proposed $4.5 million for the land, $2 million for business losses, and a confidentiality agreement preventing Dad or me from discussing the development strategy. Dad read the offer at Calder's table after closing. "That is more than I expected to sell for," he said. "You never wanted to sell." "I still don't." Claire explained that settlement could secure his finances without years of litigation. Dad looked around the small room. My mother's restored recipe pages were displayed behind glass near the kitchen. "What happens to the site?" "Meridian gets it. And Grant gets his hotel." "Possibly." "Then no." Claire did not pressure him. The decision belonged to the owner, not the lawyer, the city, or his son. The State Election Commission held a preliminary hearing on Forward Port Ashford the following Monday. Lydia Pell testified under subpoena. She admitted the nonprofit paid for polling, voter modeling, donor research, and opposition files intended for Evelyn's possible gubernatorial campaign. Did Mayor Calder know? The commission counsel asked. She attended 3 strategy presentations. Who presented the work? Grant and consultants paid by Forward Port Ashford. Was Meridian's funding disclosed during those meetings? Grant said supportive business leaders were covering the early research. Did the mayor ask which business leaders? Not during the first meeting. And later? Lydia opened a folder. At the 3rd meeting, she asked whether Meridian's participation could create a conflict with the waterfront project. The room went still. What was the response? Grant said the money was routed through a nonprofit and therefore could not be connected to a specific city action. What did Mayor Calder say? She said, "Then keep the documentation separate." Evelyn's attorney objected that Lydia was interpreting an ambiguous conversation. The commission requested the presentation calendar, attendee notes, and building access records. They placed Evelyn at every meeting. Grant's promise that the money stayed outside campaign books had not been a message she overlooked. It had been a structure they discussed together. That afternoon, Evelyn suspended Grant. She announced the decision in a written statement saying new testimony had raised questions she could no longer ignore. The suspension came after the council restricted her authority, after state subpoenas, after Lydia's public testimony, and after the city's engineering claim collapsed. Still, Evelyn described herself as responding promptly. Grant did not accept the suspension quietly. Through his attorney, he released selected emails showing Evelyn approved redevelopment pressure, campaign strategy, and emergency procurement. He claimed every action had been directed by the mayor. Evelyn answered that Grant had concealed conflicts and manipulated information. The partnership that destroyed my father's restaurant became a public argument over who had deceived whom. Investigators searched Grant's City Hall office that evening under a state warrant. They removed computers, encrypted drives, contract files, and 2 locked document cases. One case contained campaign polling. The other contained property files for businesses Meridian had targeted after Calder's Wharf. The same strategy appeared in each. Increase inspections. Create code pressure. Lower valuation. Acquire before litigation. My father had not been the only planned victim. He had simply been the first owner they believed Evelyn could silence through marriage. Near midnight, Marcus forwarded a message from Evelyn's divorce attorney. She wanted to meet privately. The stated purpose was settlement of our house and joint investments. The final sentence revealed the real reason. Mayor Calder believes Daniel possesses context that could correct the public impression that she knowingly exchanged city action for political support. I read it twice. Even after suspending Grant, she still wanted me to help explain her choices. What will you say? Marcus asked. That I don't possess context. You possess years of conversations. None that make the records false. Marcus nodded. I'll decline. The next morning, prosecutors unsealed the first charges. Noah Vickers was charged with procurement fraud, falsification of professional records, and conspiracy relating to Atlantic structural response. Lydia received immunity conditioned on truthful testimony. Grant had not yet been arrested. Neither had Evelyn. But the Attorney General announced that the investigation remained active and that additional charging decisions would follow the financial evidence. At noon, Grant appeared outside his attorney's office. He accused Evelyn of ordering the demolition to protect her political future. Then he held up a printed document. It was a memorandum authorizing him to take all necessary steps to secure the Calder parcel before the Meridian financing deadline. The authorization carried Evelyn's handwritten signature. Unlike the electronic demolition order, no one could claim her credentials had been misused. A reporter asked whether all necessary steps included a false engineering report. Grant smiled without humor. That is a question for the woman who signed it. The file that would end Evelyn's career was no longer hidden inside Elisa's archive. Grant had carried the most dangerous page out with him. And now he intended to use it to save himself. Grant's memorandum was authentic. The Attorney General's forensic team confirmed the paper came from a batch purchased by the mayor's office. The printer marks matched Evelyn's private conference room. Ink analysis placed her handwritten signature within the same period as the Meridian financing deadline. More important, investigators recovered the original digital draft from Grant's computer. The first version authorized him to coordinate lawful acquisition efforts. Grant changed that phrase to take all necessary steps to secure the Calder parcel before the Meridian financing deadline. He sent the revision to Evelyn at 7:14 one evening. She returned a photograph of the signed page 11 minutes later. Her message contained 4 words. Do not miss the deadline. The file did not prove she ordered Grant to fabricate an engineering report. It proved she gave him broad authority after receiving warnings about his brother, the ethics conflict, and my father's refusal to sell. Then she demanded a result before Meridian's financing expired. The Public Integrity Division scheduled interviews with both of them. Grant negotiated first. His attorney offered access to private messages, trust records, campaign presentations, and development contracts in exchange for consideration on potential charges. Evelyn's attorney accused him of manufacturing a story to save himself. Claire read both statements in her office. They are going to spend the next week arguing about who understood more, she said. Does it matter? Yes. Criminal liability depends on knowledge and intent. Dad's restaurant is gone either way. Civil responsibility is broader. The city authorized the demolition. Grant engineered the process. Evelyn signed the order and adopted the false report. Dad sat near the window with one of my mother's recipe books on his lap. I don't care which one thought of it first, he said. They both knew I said no. That remained the simplest truth in the case. At noon, the city council ordered a public evidentiary session concerning Evelyn's continued authority. The charter did not allow council members to simply fire an elected mayor. They could censure her, restrict administrative powers, petition a state court for removal, or request suspension if prosecutors filed qualifying charges. Council President Miriam Lowe opened the hearing by placing the signed authorization on a large screen. Evelyn sat alone at the mayor's desk. Grant's chair behind her was empty. Did you sign this? Lowe asked. Yes. What did all necessary steps mean? Lawful negotiations, condemnation preparation, inspections, and development coordination. Why did the document not say lawful? I assumed every city action would comply with law. Councilwoman Ruth Delaney held up the ethics officer's warning. You knew Mr. Vickers had a conflict. I believed it had been managed. You refused the recommended recusal. Yes. You knew his brother controlled Atlantic. I knew there was a family connection. You knew the original engineering report did not recommend emergency demolition. I knew it identified significant defects. That was not the question. Evelyn hesitated. Yes. I knew it did not recommend immediate demolition. The chamber reacted with a low wave of voices. Lowe called for order. Evelyn continued. I believed Atlantic's revised assessment reflected additional professional review. Without a named engineer? I relied on staff. Which staff? Grant. The answer placed him at the center again. Councilman Thomas Webb opened another document. This is your message telling him to proceed before Walter Calder could seek an injunction. Yes. You understood the purpose was to prevent judicial review. I understood delay could destroy the project. That is not a lawful reason to remove access to a court. I was not trying to remove access. You demolished the subject of the dispute before notice could be challenged. Evelyn looked toward the city attorney. He did not rescue her. The council then heard from Lydia Pell. She described the 3 political strategy meetings paid for by Forward Port Ashford. Evelyn had attended all of them. The presentations discussed polling for a gubernatorial campaign, donor targets, opposition research, and statewide advertising. At the 3rd meeting, a consultant displayed a slide titled Meridian Partnership Support. It included the hotel developer's logo. Did Mayor Calder see that slide? Delaney asked. Yes. Did she object? She asked whether the support would appear in campaign disclosures. What was Grant's answer? He said Forward Port Ashford would keep it legally separate. What did she say? Keep the city work and political work in different files. Evelyn leaned toward her microphone. I understood the nonprofit's activities to be independent issue advocacy. Lydia looked at her. The presentation had your photograph, proposed campaign slogan, voter targets, and a launch date. The room became silent. Did you ever tell me it was independent issue advocacy? Evelyn asked. No, did Grant? Yes. Then I relied on his representation. Lydia's attorney objected to the exchange, and Lowe ended it. Next came Commissioner Paul Reddick. He testified that Grant threatened his position when he challenged the emergency basis for demolition. He confirmed he never approved the final certificate and never authorized anyone to apply his electronic signature. Did you tell the mayor? Webb asked. I called twice before the order was signed. Did she return the calls? No. Did you contact her afterward? Yes. At 5:02 that morning. What did you say? I told her my certification had been used without permission. What did she say? Reddick looked down at his prepared statement. She said we would resolve the paperwork after the site was secure. Evelyn's attorney stood. Did she tell you to conceal the issue? No. Did she know before demolition that your approval had not been obtained? I cannot say. The distinction helped her criminal defense. It did not help her political one. By mid-afternoon, the council had established that Evelyn knew the original inspection did not require demolition, knew Grant had a conflict, knew Meridian financed political work benefiting her, authorized him to secure the parcel before a deadline, and continued the demolition after learning the commissioner's certification was disputed. The question was no longer whether Grant deceived her. It was how many warnings she had decided were less important than the hotel. During recess, Evelyn found me in a courthouse conference room. Marcus and Claire were present. Her attorney waited outside. She looked exhausted. Grant says you gave investigators our private messages. I gave them nothing from our marriage. He has conversations where I complained that your father was using you to control me. That sounds like something you said to him. It was personal. You discussed an active property dispute with your chief of staff. He was advising me. He was using it. Her eyes filled. I know that now. Dad stood near the opposite wall. Evelyn turned toward him. Walter, I will support full compensation. You don't control that anymore. I can recommend settlement. I don't need your recommendation. I can testify that the city acted unlawfully. Claire interrupted. You should discuss testimony with your own counsel. Evelyn ignored her. I can help him keep the land. Dad closed the recipe book in his hands. You keep offering to return things after someone else stops you from taking them. Her face tightened. I am trying to make this right. No, he said. You are trying to be useful to us again because you finally understand we can live without you. She looked at me. Is that what you think? Yes. The answer hurt her. She stepped closer. Daniel, I believed the hotel would save the waterfront. That may have been true. I believed Grant could deliver it. That may also have been true. Then why do you speak as if I wanted to hurt your father? Because once he stood in the way, you decided hurting him was acceptable. She began crying. I never thought the building would come down that fast. You ordered it before sunrise. I thought he would take the settlement afterward. He told you 4 times he did not want to sell. I thought he was negotiating. You thought his no meant you had not applied enough pressure. The words ended the conversation. Evelyn left without asking me to protect her. That evening, investigators searched Forward Port Ashford's offices. They recovered invoices showing Meridian paid for polling, campaign branding, travel planning, and donor research directly benefiting Evelyn. One spreadsheet tracked those payments against city milestones. Development Authority approval. Environmental clearance. Parcel control. Demolition. Lease execution. Beside each milestone was a political expenditure Grant could release after completion. The Calder parcel line showed, site cleared 250,000 statewide media reservation. The media reservation was purchased 2 hours after the demolition order was signed. Grant claimed the spreadsheet was an internal proposal Evelyn never saw. Investigators found a printed copy inside her home office. Her handwritten notes appeared beside 2 entries. Move donor launch after hotel announcement. Avoid same-week disclosure. The evidence did not show a simple bribe handed across a table. It showed a continuing arrangement in which public progress on Meridian unlocked political support for Evelyn. The Attorney General presented the record to a state grand jury. 2 days later, indictments were unsealed. Grant was charged with conspiracy, procurement fraud, falsification of government records, unlawful campaign coordination, and obstruction. Noah Vickers faced additional professional record and contracting charges. Evelyn was charged with misconduct in office, conspiracy to misuse emergency authority, unlawful campaign coordination, and obstruction related to the demolition records. The indictment was an accusation, not a conviction. Under state law, the governor suspended her from exercising mayoral authority while the qualifying public corruption charges remained pending. Council President Lowe became acting mayor. Evelyn's security detail was withdrawn. Her city hall credentials were disabled. The mayoral seal was removed from her office before sunset. She could have remained suspended while fighting the case. Instead, she announced her resignation the following morning. She stood outside City Hall without Grant behind her. I believed a major development would justify decisions I knew avoided normal safeguards, she said. Grant Vickers exploited that belief, but he did not create my authority or sign my name. I did. A reporter asked whether she blamed me for releasing the controlled acquisition archive. Elise Moreno preserved the file. Daniel followed his attorney's advice. Neither of them destroyed my career. Then who did? Evelyn looked directly into the cameras. I did, when I decided the law was an obstacle to a result I wanted. Her resignation became effective at noon. The file Elise saved had stopped the parcel transfer. The signature Grant released had exposed Evelyn's authority. The payment spreadsheet had shown why the deadline mattered. Together, they ended the political career she had protected more fiercely than my father's rights, our marriage, or the truth. At 12:07, Marcus received a message from Evelyn's divorce attorney. She would not contest the separation, Mercer Civil's ownership, or temporary division of assets. She requested only one thing: a meeting with my father and me after the criminal proceedings stabilized. Dad read the request. No, I looked at him. You're sure? She had meetings before the demolition. That was when talking mattered. I told Marcus to decline. For the first time since the excavators arrived, Evelyn no longer controlled the city, the site, the project, or the timing of our response. The answer was ours. And it was no. Evelyn entered court as a former mayor. No security detail followed her. No staff member carried her files. The press still crowded the courthouse steps, but the questions no longer concerned policy, development, or her political future. They concerned intent. The prosecution's case did not depend on proving Evelyn invented every part of Grant's plan. Grant created the controlled acquisition strategy. Noah supplied the false engineering document. Lydia managed the political nonprofit. Commissioner Reddick allowed an unsafe approval system to exist. But Evelyn had received the original inspection, ignored the ethics warning, authorized Grant to secure the parcel, signed the demolition order, and continued after learning the building commissioner disputed his certification. She had also attended campaign presentations funded by Meridian and written notes on a spreadsheet linking political spending to development milestones. Her attorney, Samuel Breen, argued that those facts showed reckless leadership, not criminal conspiracy. She wanted the hotel built, he said during a pre-trial hearing. She wanted a future campaign. Those ambitions may have distorted her judgment, but the state must prove she knowingly agreed to illegal acts. The prosecutor answered with Evelyn's own message. Make sure nothing ties the work to a city decision. You do not separate two things unless you understand they are connected, she said. The judge denied the defense motion to dismiss. Trial remained 3 months away. Grant did not wait. The evidence against him included his brother's company records, false reports, hidden compensation agreement, deleted messages, and the spreadsheet tracking political payments against city approvals. His attorney reopened plea negotiations. Grant offered to testify that Evelyn New Atlantic's emergency report was unsupported and that the demolition was intended to defeat my father's expected injunction. In return, he wanted reduced charges and protection from the longest available sentence. Claire called me after prosecutors disclosed the offer. He is trying to make her the principal decision-maker, she said. Was she? In some decisions. Not in the entire scheme. What does he claim? That he told her Hendricks refused to certify immediate danger. He says she ordered him to find another report and proceed before your father reached court. Can he prove it? He recorded several meetings. Of course he had. Grant preserved leverage the way other people preserved family photographs. The recordings were reviewed under protective order. In one, Evelyn asked whether the city could condemn the parcel before Meridian's financing deadline. Grant said formal eminent domain would require notice, appraisal disputes, and months of hearings. She replied, then the safety route is faster. Grant warned that the existing inspection did not support emergency action. Evelyn said, you told me every old waterfront structure has enough defects if the standard is framed correctly. The recording did not show Grant misleading her. It showed them solving the obstacle together. Another meeting occurred the night before demolition. Reddick had objected. Hendricks refused to change his conclusion. Elise had cited the retention law. Grant asked whether Evelyn wanted to pause. She answered, if we pause, Walter files. If Walter files, Daniel brings engineers. If Daniel brings engineers, the hotel dies. Then came the sentence that ended her remaining defense. Clear the site before they can turn this into a hearing. The hearing she had tried to prevent was now playing her own voice. Samuel Breen met with prosecutors the next day. Evelyn began plea negotiations. Dad heard the news while preparing lunch at Calder's table. He was trimming fish beside the recovered recipe books. So she admits it now? He asked. She may admit enough to avoid trial. That isn't what I asked. No. Not yet. He returned to the cutting board. She admitted it to herself before she signed the order. Everything after that was deciding whether other people could prove it. Calder's table had expanded from 12 tables to 20. Dad hired back 14 former employees. Several others had found permanent positions elsewhere but returned for weekend shifts. The pop-up was profitable. It was not Calder's Wharf. Dad no longer pretended it could be. The original site remained fenced under Judge Holt's order. The cleared foundation faced the harbor like an open wound. Meridian abandoned the 22-story hotel plan after its lenders withdrew. The development company entered restructuring and sold its interests in 2 nearby parcels. A smaller local consortium approached Dad about a mixed-use project preserving his ownership. Their proposal placed a rebuilt restaurant at street level with offices and apartments above it. Dad would contribute the land through a long-term ground lease rather than sell it. He would keep ownership. The developers would finance construction. The restaurant would have its own entrance, kitchen, dock access, and name. No hotel logo above it. Dad reviewed the proposal with Claire, Priya, and an independent financial advisor. What do you think? He asked me. I think the numbers are reasonable. That isn't what I asked. I think Mom would complain about apartments over the kitchen. She complained about everything above a kitchen. She would also like that you kept the land. Dad looked at the site plan. I don't want to rebuild the old place exactly. You don't have to. I spent months thinking justice meant putting every wall back where it was. And now? Now I want something they didn't design for me. He approved preliminary negotiations. The civil case against the city moved toward settlement. Acting Mayor Miriam Lowe did not defend the demolition. The city's insurer and outside counsel accepted that the emergency order lacked proper certification and that Evelyn's administration had violated due process. The remaining dispute concerned damages. The city's first offer totaled $5.9 million. Dad rejected it. The second included $4 million for the land, compensation for the destroyed business, employee support costs, personal property, legal fees, and restoration expenses. It also returned clear title and development control to him. The total package exceeded $10 million, but the property remained his. Dad accepted after one condition was added. The city had to issue a formal public correction stating Calder's Wharf did not present an imminent collapse danger and that Walter Calder had lawfully refused to sell. The council approved it unanimously. At the public meeting, Dad sat in the front row. Acting Mayor Lowe read the correction herself. No one described him as nostalgic. No one called him an obstacle. When the statement ended, the chamber applauded. Dad did not stand. He simply folded the printed copy and placed it inside my mother's oldest recipe book. Evelyn's plea agreement was announced 1 week later. She pleaded guilty to misconduct in office and conspiracy to misuse emergency authority. The unlawful campaign coordination charge was resolved through a separate consent judgment requiring repayment of improperly funded political expenses and a permanent ban on managing campaign funds. Prosecutors dismissed the obstruction count in exchange for truthful testimony against Grant and Noah. The agreement recommended no prison sentence if Evelyn cooperated fully, but the judge retained final authority. She would face probation, community service, substantial fines, and a permanent prohibition on holding public office in South Carolina. She signed the agreement. No forged credentials. No electronic approval through staff. Her handwritten name appeared beneath every admission. At the plea hearing, the judge asked her to describe what she had done. Evelyn stood at the defense table. I used emergency authority to destroy Walter Calder's building before he could obtain judicial review, she said. I knew the original inspection did not support immediate demolition. I authorized Grant Vickers to secure the parcel before Meridian's deadline, and I accepted a revised report without lawful professional certification. The judge asked why. Because the hotel project supported my political plans, and I believed losing it would damage the city and my future. Did Mr. Vickers force you? No. Did he deceive you? He concealed some financial interests and created parts of the scheme. But I knew enough to stop. I chose not to. Did your husband cause your resignation? No. Did Walter Calder? No. Who did? I did. The judge accepted the plea. Sentencing was scheduled after Grant's case concluded. Outside court, Evelyn did not hold a press conference. She left through the main doors and saw Dad and me near the steps. Her attorney approached Marcus. She would like 5 minutes, he said. Dad shook his head. I'm going back to the restaurant. He walked toward Claire's car. I could have followed him. Instead, I agreed to speak with Evelyn in a courthouse consultation room. Marcus remained outside. Evelyn sat across from me. She looked smaller than she had in City Hall, but I reminded myself that losing authority did not make someone harmless or honest. Only choices did that. I testified clearly, she said. Yes. I supported the city settlement. That was appropriate. I gave investigators every recording and campaign file I had. That was required. She lowered her eyes. I keep listing things as if responsibility earns points. It doesn't. I know. Her wedding ring remained on her hand. Mine had been removed the night I left the house. She noticed me looking at it. I haven't known what to do with this. That is your decision. I thought taking it off meant accepting the marriage was over. The separation filing already said that. I kept believing the criminal case was the reason you would not come home. It wasn't. I understand now. I waited. She breathed slowly before continuing. I destroyed the restaurant because Grant gave me a way to call your father selfish. I needed him to be selfish because otherwise I was the person taking from him. Her voice broke. I told myself you would eventually understand. You always understood the pressure I was under. I understood it. I did not agree that it excused you. I know. She removed the ring and placed it on the table. I chose Grant's promises because he made ambition sound like duty. You asked what the project cost. He only told me what it could make me. That was why you kept him. Yes. And why you kept me outside. Yes. Tears ran down her face. I am sorry I destroyed the place where your mother lived in every room. I am sorry I made Walter watch it. I am sorry I planned to use his grief for cameras. And I am sorry I treated your love as something I could spend without asking. It was the apology she should have given before the first excavator moved. Now it could do only one thing. Tell the truth. I believe you are sorry, I said. Hope rose in her expression. I ended it before it became another misunderstanding. I am still divorcing you. Her eyes closed. Is there any chance after sentencing? No. After counseling? No. Years from now? No. She pressed both hands against the edge of the table. I'm not asking you to forget. You are asking me to return. Yes. I won't. Because you don't believe I can change? I believe you may become better. But your better future does not require my marriage. She cried quietly. I did not move closer. Comfort had once become the bridge Evelyn used to cross every boundary after violating it. This time, I allowed the distance to remain. After several minutes, she picked up the ring. What happens to us now? The divorce proceeds. We divide the house and joint assets. You face sentencing. I help Dad rebuild. And after that? We live separate lives. She nodded. I won't ask again. When I stood, she said my name. Daniel. I turned. Grant told me your father would surrender once the building was gone. He was wrong. He said you would protect me once the investigation threatened my career. He was wrong again. Evelyn looked down at the ring in her palm. No. He understood who I thought you were. I left without answering. 2 days later, Grant accepted a plea agreement. He admitted procurement fraud, conspiracy, falsification of records, unlawful campaign coordination, and obstruction. He agreed to surrender the completion trust, consulting profits, and property purchased with Meridian funds. Noah pleaded guilty to falsifying the engineering certification and participating in the emergency contract scheme. Lydia's cooperation protected her from prosecution, but she was barred from managing political funds for 10 years. Commissioner Reddick resigned and accepted administrative penalties for allowing others to use his approval credentials. The development scheme ended through courts, audits, and contracts, not one dramatic announcement. At Mercer Civil, Priya placed the final design for Dad's new building on my desk. The ground floor showed a restaurant facing the harbor. Above it were 3 levels of offices. The original blue sign would be repaired and mounted over the entrance. Calder's Wharf. Not Calder's at Meridian. Not a memorial inside someone else's hotel. Dad's name. Dad's land. Dad's decision. Construction would begin the week after my final divorce hearing. The calendar did not feel cruel. It felt exact. One life had been demolished without consent. The next would be built only after every owner signed. The divorce hearing took 19 minutes. Evelyn sat at one table with her attorney. Marcus sat beside me at the other. There were no cameras inside the courtroom. No council members. No supporters holding signs. No Grant whispering into her ear. The judge reviewed our settlement agreement. Mercer Civil remained entirely mine. Evelyn retained her retirement accounts and the remaining royalties from a book published during her first mayoral term. We divided our joint investments equally. The house would be sold, with the proceeds split after the mortgage and legal expenses were paid. Neither of us requested support. Evelyn waived any claim that my engineering firm had benefited from her public office. I waived no civil rights connected to the demolition, though Dad's settlement had already resolved the family's claims against the city. The judge looked over the paperwork. Both parties understand that this decree permanently dissolves the marriage? Yes, Your Honor, I said. Evelyn answered after a brief pause. Yes. The judge signed. 9 years ended with one ordinary judicial act. Outside the courtroom, Marcus handed me a certified copy. You are legally divorced, he said. I looked at my name beneath the case number. Daniel Mercer. During the previous year, Evelyn's administration had described me as a conflicted husband, an emotional engineer, and a private obstacle to public progress. Now the court record described me only as a former spouse who had signed an agreement voluntarily. My name belonged to me again. Evelyn emerged with her attorney. She wore a cream-colored coat and carried a small cardboard box. Her sentencing had occurred 2 weeks earlier. The judge placed her on 5 years of supervised probation, ordered 1,200 hours of community service, imposed substantial fines, and permanently barred her from holding state or local public office. She was also required to complete ethics and financial disclosure training before working for any organization receiving public funds. The sentence did not send her to prison. The prosecutor had recommended probation because she pleaded guilty, cooperated against Grant and Noah, helped recover political funds, and had no prior criminal record. The judge still spoke plainly. You were elected to protect the process when powerful interests demanded shortcuts, he told her. Instead, you became the shortcut. Evelyn accepted the sentence without asking for sympathy. Now she stopped several feet from me in the courthouse hallway. The house received an offer, she said. Marcus told me. It is slightly below appraisal. I approved it. She nodded. I packed the remaining things that belong to you. She held out the cardboard box. Inside were old engineering notebooks, 2 framed photographs of my parents, my mother's recipe for lemon pie, and the brass key from Calder's Wharf's original front door. Dad had given the key to Evelyn years earlier after she joked that being family should come with permanent access to breakfast. "I thought Walter might want this," she said. "He probably will. I should have returned it sooner." "Yes." She lowered the box. "I'm working at a private literacy center. I heard. I answer phones 3 days a week and help adults prepare for high school equivalency exams." "How is it?" "Different. From City Hall? From believing every room needs me to lead it." That sounded like something a counselor had helped her understand. It also sounded true. She looked toward the signed decree in my hand. "I won't ask you to reconsider. Thank you. I still think about what would have happened if I had stopped the demolition that night. Dad would still have his restaurant." "I know. And you might still be mayor." She shook her head. "I would still have been the person willing to do it. I just might not have been caught yet." The honesty surprised me. Evelyn took a slow breath. "Grant's sentencing is next month." "I know. His attorney asked me to support a shorter sentence because I benefited from the project." "Will you?" I submitted a factual statement. I described my responsibility and his. I did not ask the judge for a specific result. "That is appropriate." She looked at the box again. "I used to think losing office was the worst thing that could happen to me. And now? Office gave me a place to hide from the person I was becoming." The elevator doors opened behind her. She stepped inside, then turned. "I hope Walter's opening goes well. He did not invite you." "I know." She did not look wounded by the boundary. At least, she did not make the wound our responsibility. "Goodbye, Daniel." "Goodbye, Evelyn." The doors closed. Construction on the new Calder's Wharf began 4 days later. Dad insisted on attending the first concrete pour at 6 in the morning. He wore a hard hat over the same faded baseball cap he had used in the old restaurant kitchen. The local consortium created a separate development company for the project. Dad contributed the land through a 99-year ground lease while keeping title. The developers financed the offices and apartments above the restaurant. Dad financed his kitchen using part of the city settlement. Every agreement identified ownership clearly. No one received control because they promised future jobs. No one acquired the land through emergency authority. No one signed for Dad. Priya and I reviewed the foundation design through Mercer Civil, but we declined the construction management contract to avoid controlling too much of a family project. An independent engineering firm certified the work. Dad complained about the additional expense. Then he approved it. "I'm learning," he said. The city placed a permanent public notice at the edge of the property during construction. It summarized the court findings. The former structure had not presented an imminent collapse hazard. The emergency demolition lacked required certification. Walter Calder had lawfully refused to sell. The city apologized for violating his property rights. Dad read it once. Then he asked the contractor to move it away from the future restaurant entrance. "I don't want people thinking they came to eat at a lawsuit." The new building took 14 months. During that time, Calder's table remained open in the rented event hall. Dad expanded the menu gradually and hired back 23 of the original 32 employees. Some did not return. One moved to Atlanta. 2 opened a catering company. Others had found jobs with better hours and health insurance. Dad did not describe their absence as betrayal. "They had to build lives while I was deciding what mine still looked like," he said. Grant Vickers received 11 years in federal prison for procurement fraud, conspiracy, obstruction, and unlawful political finance activity. The court ordered forfeiture of his consulting profits, trust assets, and the completion payment he had expected from Meridian. Noah received a shorter sentence and lost the ability to participate in government contracting. Lydia Pell avoided prison under her cooperation agreement but paid civil penalties and remained barred from campaign finance work. Commissioner Reddick lost his position and pension enhancements. He was not charged criminally because investigators found no evidence he joined the development conspiracy, but the state licensing board sanctioned him for allowing others to use his approval token. Meridian Hospitality Partners dissolved after lenders withdrew and investors sued its management. The hotel was never built. Port Ashford did not collapse without it. A different development group renovated 2 warehouses farther south, where the city already owned the land. The project created fewer jobs than Grant had promised. It also required no false inspections, secret political payments, or demolished family businesses. Progress survived accountability. That fact damaged Evelyn's old argument more than any courtroom statement. On the morning Calder's Wharf reopened, Dad arrived at 4:30. I found him standing alone inside the new kitchen. The equipment shone beneath bright ceiling lights. My mother's restored recipe pages were displayed behind protective glass near the office. The repaired blue sign hung above the front entrance. Calder's Wharf. The split through the word had not been hidden completely. The restorer reinforced the wood but left a thin visible line through the paint. "You could have made it look new," I said. Dad adjusted a stack of plates. "It isn't new. No, it's still good." He opened the old brass key in his palm. The new door used a modern electronic lock, so the key no longer opened anything. Dad mounted it inside the register cabinet. "Your mother would say that is sentimental nonsense. She would cry while saying it." Yes. At 6, the original staff gathered for a private breakfast before the public opening. Dad cooked shrimp and grits himself. At 7, the first customers arrived. By 7:15, every table was occupied. Reporters waited outside, but Dad allowed only one camera inside. He refused speeches from politicians. Acting Mayor Miriam Lowe purchased breakfast and waited for a table like everyone else. Near noon, a reporter asked Dad whether rebuilding felt like defeating Evelyn. Dad looked toward the kitchen. "My restaurant is not her punishment," he said. "It is my restaurant." That sentence became the only quote he allowed on the wall. Mercer Civil grew during the same year. The independent audits cleared every city contract. Our refusal to hide records attracted hospital systems, counties, and private developers that wanted engineering work capable of surviving public review. Priya became managing partner. I remained president but stopped involving myself in every project decision. Watching Evelyn centralize authority until no one could challenge her had taught me another lesson. A company did not become stronger because its founder controlled every answer. It became stronger when disagreement could stop a bad one. At the reopening dinner, Priya introduced me to Hannah Brooks, an attorney representing the local consortium. Hannah and I had spoken during contract negotiations, always with Dad or Claire present. She was practical, patient, and unimpressed by family mythology. She asked whether I planned to spend the entire evening inspecting the building. "I'm checking the drainage. It passed 3 independent inspections." "I know. Then you're hiding in the parking lot." She was right. We returned inside together. Nothing dramatic happened that night. No public declaration. No instant promise that one good woman could repair what another had broken. We shared dinner after closing. A month later, we did it again. The relationship grew through plans neither of us made on behalf of the other. That was enough. Evelyn did not attend the reopening. She sent Dad a letter through Claire. He read it privately. She apologized for destroying the restaurant, abusing emergency authority, and treating his refusal as a problem to overcome. She did not ask forgiveness or permission to visit. Dad placed the letter in a drawer. "Are you going to answer?" I asked. "No, ever. I don't know." That was his right. Forgiveness, like property, could not be condemned for someone else's preferred use. A year after reopening, Calder's Wharf hosted a dinner for the restaurant's 45th anniversary. Dad stood before employees, customers, and family with my mother's oldest recipe book in his hands. He thanked the staff who returned. He thanked those who helped during the temporary location. He thanked Priya, Claire, the independent engineers, and the construction workers. Then he looked at me. "My son believed rebuilding meant restoring what was taken," he said. He was wrong. The room laughed softly. Dad smiled. "You cannot restore time. You cannot rebuild the same morning, the same walls, or the same person you were before someone destroyed them." He looked around the dining room. "You can build something that belongs to you again." After dinner, I stepped onto the dock. The harbor lights moved across the water. Behind me, conversation and dishes filled the restaurant. Hannah joined me. "Your father knows how to end a speech," she said. "He had 45 years to prepare it." She rested her hand beside mine on the railing. Across the harbor, the empty tower site once reserved for Meridian Grand had become a public park and ferry terminal. Port Ashford had changed. Just not in the way Grant promised. My phone vibrated with a routine approval request from Mercer Civil. Priya needed my signature on an independent review policy for politically sensitive projects. I opened the document. The final paragraph required every executive, including me, to step away when personal interests could affect professional judgment. I signed. Daniel Mercer. My name. My decision. Behind me, the repaired sign glowed above the restaurant Dad had chosen to rebuild. Evelyn's signature had once cleared the site before we could reach a courtroom. One preserved file had stopped her from controlling what happened next. But the file did not rebuild the restaurant. Evidence stopped the theft. Courts returned the rights. Workers raised the walls. Dad chose the future. And this time, every person whose name appeared on the project had signed for themselves. That's all for today. Remember to subscribe and support us.